He lost everything after a betrayal and saw no reason to go on. But a lovely little girl, selling origami in the rain, changed the course of his life. Together they would face a powerful enemy, with intelligence, courage, and a promise of redemption. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and let us know what city you're watching from. Let's get back to it. I promise, this is going to be the best story you'll ever hear. The rain was coming down hard on a Thursday night in New York City. The streets of the East Village glistened under the yellow glow of the streetlights, reflecting the heavy sky that hadn't let up for hours. Robert Miller walked aimlessly, his hands shoved into the pockets of his worn-out coat, feeling the cold water run down his face. He didn't care. For months now, very little mattered. There was a time when Robert was a respected name, a last name that opened doors at the city's best restaurants, that guaranteed front-row seats at charity galas, that made assistants answer calls with reverence. Robert Miller was the co-founder of Miller & Davis Investments, one of the country's top wealth management firms. He signed multi-million-dollar contracts, negotiated with international funds, and built financial empires while sipping coffee in glass-walled offices at the top of skyscrapers. His life was made of numbers, charts, calculated risks, and constant victories. Until it all came crashing down. The betrayal came from within. Edward Davis, his partner of over 15 years, the man he considered a brother, had orchestrated a scheme as sophisticated as it was cruel. Forged documents, ghost accounts, transfers to offshore tax havens, fictitious investments. Everything was meticulously planned to siphon off billions while pinning the blame on Robert. When the scandal broke in the press, it was Robert Miller's name that appeared in the headlines. It was he who faced the cameras, the lawsuits, the fury of the defrauded investors. Edward, with his polished charm and ruthless lawyers, managed to get away. Clean. More than that, he came out of it looking like a victim, the betrayed partner who had the courage to blow the whistle. Robert lost everything. The company, the sprawling 3,000-square-foot apartment on the Upper East Side, the imported car, the bank accounts frozen by the court. He lost his friends, who vanished like smoke when the money evaporated. He lost his wife, who filed for divorce before the trial even ended, taking most of what was left with her. And above all, he lost himself. Now at 52, Robert lived in a cramped 400-square-foot apartment in Astoria, Queens. A simple place with old furniture, peeling walls, and a window that looked out onto a grey brick wall. He slept little, ate even less, and spent his days shuttling between doctor's appointments and taking medication to control the blood pressure that spiked at any moment. The doctor had warned him, if he didn't change, his heart wouldn't take it. But change what? For what? The world Robert knew no longer existed, and he, at least the Robert who existed before, didn't either. It was on one of those pointless walks under the rain that washed over the city that he saw her for the first time. She was a small girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, sitting on a piece of cardboard on the corner of St. Mark's Place and 2nd Avenue. She held a shoebox displaying small origami figures, birds, flowers, butterflies. The folded paper creations were delicate, almost perfect, but they were soaked by the relentless rain. The girl wore a jacket too thin for the cold, sneakers with holes in them, and her brown hair was plastered to her wet face. Her dark eyes followed the few pedestrians hurrying by, but she didn't ask for anything. She just watched. Robert stopped. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the way she looked at people, with an intensity that was strange for a child. Maybe it was the rain, coming down too hard for someone so small to be out on the street alone. Maybe it was just the emptiness inside him, searching for something, anything, to make him feel like he was still human. He approached slowly. The girl lifted her eyes and met his gaze. There was no fear there, no pleading, just a silent assessment, as if she were calculating whether it was worth her time to wait for him to say something. Robert pointed to one of the origami figures, a blue bird. His voice came out hoarse, as if he hadn't spoken to anyone in a long time. "How much?" She hesitated. $5. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a $10 bill. "Keep the change." The girl took the money but didn't say thank you. She just held out the paper bird and kept looking at him, as if she expected him to leave quickly. Robert stood there, holding the soggy origami. The rain fell on both of them, and for some reason he couldn't understand, he couldn't move. "Have you eaten today?" The question slipped out before he could think. The girl didn't answer right away. Her eyes narrowed, suspicious. "Why?" "Because it's raining and it's getting late." Robert looked around. The street was almost empty. "There's a restaurant right there on the corner. Let's go." She shook her head. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." Robert sighed. He was tired, wet, and the headache that had been looming all day was starting to tighten its grip. "But I'm going to get something to eat, and I don't want to eat alone, so you'd be doing me a favor if you came with me." It was a strange argument, and he knew it. But the girl, after a long silence, gathered her things, tucked the shoebox under her arm, and stood up. She was even smaller on her feet, frail, with a posture that mixed distrust with a strange dignity. They went into the small buffet-style restaurant on the corner. The owner, a short man with a grey mustache, glanced at them sideways but said nothing. Robert grabbed a tray and motioned for the girl to pick whatever she wanted. She took rice, beans, a chicken leg and some salad. No dessert, no juice, just the basics. Robert put very little on his own plate and paid at the counter. They sat at a table in the corner. The girl ate slowly but methodically, chewing each bite as if she wanted to savor every last grain of rice. Robert just watched, pushing the food around on his own plate without any appetite. The headache was getting worse, and he knew he should have taken his medication before leaving the house. "What's your name?" he asked. She looked up. "Maya." "Maya what?" "Just Maya." Robert nodded. He understood. When your life falls apart, sometimes even a last name feels too heavy to carry. "I'm Robert." "I know." He frowned. "You know?" "I saw your face on TV. It was a while ago, but I remember." Robert felt his stomach clench. Even a street kid recognized the man who had been called a crook on national television. He looked down, not knowing what to say. Maya kept eating. "You didn't do what they said you did you?" The question caught Robert by surprise. He looked at her, incredulous. "How do you know?" She shrugged. "You don't look like someone who steals. You look like someone who's been stolen from." It was simple, maybe too obvious. But no one in all these months had said that to him. No one had believed him. And now here, in a cheap restaurant, a street kid he barely knew could see something the rest of the world had ignored. Robert couldn't answer. His throat tightened, and he just nodded, staring at the empty plate in front of him. They left the restaurant as the rain began to let. "Hop!" The girl held her box of origami and looked from side to side as if deciding where to go next. Robert hesitated. He knew he should just go home, take his pills, and try to sleep. But the thought of leaving her alone, heading back to some cold, dangerous place, bothered him more than he wanted to admit. "Where do you live?" he asked. Maya looked at him with that sharp gaze again. "Why?" "Because it's late and it's dangerous. If you want, you can sleep on my couch tonight. You can leave in the morning, no problem." She didn't answer right away. She sized Robert up, as if trying to gauge whether she could trust him. Finally, she nodded. "Okay." Robert's apartment was 3 blocks away. It was an old building, a walk-up with no doorman, narrow stairs, and a musty smell. They climbed to the 3rd floor in silence. When Robert opened the door, Maya entered slowly, looking around attentively. The place was small, but clean. There was an old couch, a table with mismatched chairs, a bookshelf with a few books, and a tiny kitchen that could barely fit a stove and a refrigerator. "The bathrooms, over there," Robert pointed. "If you want to take a hot shower, there's a towel in the closet." Maya nodded and went into the bathroom, closing the door softly. Robert heard the shower turn on and sat on the couch, running his hands over his wet face. What was he doing? Bringing a strange child home, offering her shelter as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Anyone would say he was crazy, but the truth was, Robert no longer cared what people said. When Maya came out of the bathroom, her hair still damp and wearing the same clothes, she seemed a little less tense. Robert handed her a clean blanket and a pillow. "The couch is all yours. If you need anything, you can wake me up." She settled in without a word, wrapping herself in the blanket with the shoebox of origami beside her. Robert went to his room, closed the door, and lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The headache was throbbing now, and he knew he should have gone to the doctor, but the exhaustion was overwhelming. He closed his eyes and tried to sleep. He was awakened by a noise from the living room. He glanced at the clock on his nightstand, 3 in the morning. Robert got up slowly, still a bit groggy, and opened his bedroom door. Maya was sitting at the table, an old notebook in front of her and a pen in her hand. The living room light was on, and she was writing something with intense concentration, as if in a trance. Robert approached. "Can't sleep?" She didn't answer immediately, just kept writing. Robert stood beside her and looked at the notebook. What he saw left him paralyzed. It wasn't words, it was numbers, formulas, complex equations that he, despite having dealt with finance his entire life, couldn't fully comprehend. The handwriting was childish, but the content was anything but. "What is this?" he asked, his voice low. Maya stopped writing and looked at him. "It's math. I can see it's math. But what are you doing?" She hesitated, as if she didn't know how to explain. "Just solving things." "Solving what?" "Problems." She shrugged. "They get stuck in my head. If I write them down, they go away." Robert sat in the chair next to her. His heart was beating fast, not from the headache, but from the discovery of what he was seeing. He carefully picked up the notebook and flipped through the pages. All of them were filled with numbers, graphs, sequences that seemed to follow their own logic. This wasn't a child's scribbling. It was something more, much more. "Where did you learn this?" he asked, almost whispering. Maya shrugged again. "On my own. I learned to read from some magazines I found in the trash. Then I found some old books. They had math in them. I liked it." Robert was silent, processing what he had just heard. This girl, who sold origami in the rain to survive, had a rare talent. No more than rare, extraordinary. And she was alone, invisible, lost in a city that didn't care. "Do you go to school?" he asked. Maya shook her head. "I used to, but I stopped." "Why?" "Because my grandma got sick. I had to work." "Where's your grandma now?" "In the hospital." Maya's voice grew softer. "She's not doing well. They said she's not going to get better." Robert felt a tightness in his chest. He knew what it was like to lose someone. He knew what it was like to be alone. And now, looking at this girl who wrote equations in the middle of the night, as if it were the only way to cope with her pain, he understood that he had found something he wasn't looking for, but that he might have needed more than he could imagine. "Maya." He waited until she looked at him. "Do you want to keep studying?" She didn't answer, but her eyes lit up for a moment. "I can help you. I don't have much, but I have enough for that." Robert took a deep breath. "If you want, you can stay here, for now, until we figure things out." Maya kept looking at him, as if trying to understand if this was real or just another empty promise the world made. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Okay." And so, on that rainy Thursday night, Robert Miller and Maya began a journey that neither of them could have predicted. He, a broken man searching for redemption. She, a brilliant girl just looking for a place to belong. In the following days, Robert realized his life had changed in a way he hadn't expected. Maya would wake up early, organize her things in silence, and spend hours reading or writing in her notebook. She was quiet, observant, and rarely asked for anything. But there was a presence there, a different energy that filled the empty apartment. Robert started to get his own life in order. He bought real food, cleaned the apartment more often, and began taking his medication on time. It wasn't for him, it was for her. After a week, Robert decided he needed to take action. He looked up how to formalize Maya's situation. He went to social services offices, filled out forms, and explained the situation dozens of times. The bureaucracy was slow and frustrating, but he persisted. He applied for temporary guardianship, arguing that the girl was in a vulnerable situation and that he could offer a safe home. The social workers looked at him with suspicion. He was a single, unemployed man with a history of financial scandal. But Robert didn't give up. He presented documents, agreed to home visits, and went through interviews. And surprisingly, after almost a month, the temporary guardianship was granted. Maya started attending a public school near the apartment. Within the first few days, her teachers noticed something different. She solved math problems that hadn't been taught yet. She corrected equations on the board with unnerving confidence. When one teacher tried to explain a formula in a simplified way, Maya raised her hand and offered a more efficient, more elegant method. Some educators were annoyed. Others were fascinated. Robert was called to the school more than once. The principal, a serious woman with round glasses, received him with a worried expression. "Mr. Miller, we need to talk about Maya." He felt his stomach clench. "Did she do something wrong?" "No, it's not that," the principal sighed. "It's just that she's far beyond the level of her classmates. The teachers don't know how to handle it. She finishes her assignments in minutes and gets bored. She corrects the teachers in front of the other students. It's not malicious, but it's causing some discomfort." Robert took a deep breath. "She has a gift, a rare talent. It can't be ignored." "I agree, but we need an evaluation. Specialists who can understand what's happening. Children like Maya need the right environment." And so Maya underwent a battery of tests: psychologists, educational specialists, advanced mathematics professors. They all came away impressed. One of them, a university professor named Dr. Beatrice Warren, told Robert something he would never forget. "This girl isn't just smart. She's a prodigy. She sees patterns where others see chaos. If she's guided properly, she could do incredible things." Robert felt a mix of pride and fear. Pride for being by the side of someone so special. Fear because he didn't know if he would be able to protect her from a world that, as he knew all too well, didn't forgive talents that stood out. But there was something that still bothered Maya. Even with a stable routine, with school, with Robert by her side, she had nightmares. She would wake up in the middle of the night sweaty and scared. She hid food under her pillow as if afraid that hunger would return. She would stare out the window with that vigilant expression, as if expecting something bad to happen at any moment. Robert tried to talk to her, but she would shut down, until one night, after a particularly violent nightmare, Maya finally spoke. "I'm scared of going back to the street." Robert sat on the edge of the couch where she slept. "You're not going back." "How do you know?" She looked at him with teary eyes. "Everyone who said they'd take care of me disappeared. My mum disappeared. My dad disappeared. My grandma got sick. What if you disappear too?" Robert felt a lump in his throat. He didn't have any easy answers. He couldn't promise that nothing bad would ever happen. Life had taught him that promises are fragile, but there was something he could do. "Maya, I'm not going to disappear. And if something happens to me, I'll make sure everything is taken care of so you'll be okay. I'm going to file for full adoption. You'll be my daughter. For real. On paper and in life." Maya looked at him, and for the first time since they had met, her eyes filled with tears. "Why? Why are you doing this?" Robert smiled, a tired but sincere smile. "Because you gave me something I thought I had lost forever." "What?" "A reason." And that night, in the silence of that modest apartment in Astoria, Robert Miller and Maya stopped being strangers. They became a family. The following months transformed Robert and Maya's lives in ways neither of them could have imagined. The apartment in Astoria, once silent and gloomy, was now filled with voices, routines, and small rituals that gave meaning to their days. Robert learned to make pancakes on Sunday mornings, even if they always burned a little around the edges. Maya taught him how to fold origami while explaining mathematical theories he pretended to understand. They watched old movies on the small living room TV, shared the last piece of cake, and argued about simple things: the weather, school, what to cook for dinner. The full adoption was approved 6 months after the temporary guardianship. Robert remembered the day the judge signed the papers as if it were yesterday. Maya was by his side, serious, wearing a white blouse Robert had bought especially for the occasion. When the judge asked if she consented to the adoption, Maya looked at Robert and said, in that firm voice of hers, "Yes, I do." Robert felt his eyes sting. He had lost everything once, but now, holding this little girl's hand, he felt he had gained something infinitely greater. When they left the courthouse, Maya called him Dad for the first time. It wasn't a grand moment, just a quiet, "Thanks, Dad," as they walked down the sidewalk. But to Robert, it was worth more than all the multi-million-dollar contracts he had ever signed. Maya's school routine remained challenging, but now she had support. Dr. Warren, the professor who had been captivated by the girl's talent, started giving her private lessons on Saturdays free of charge. She introduced Maya to concepts of advanced calculus, number theory, and algorithms. Maya absorbed it all with frightening ease, making connections that even Dr. Warren, with her PhD in mathematics, found impressive. "She doesn't just solve problems, Robert," Dr. Warren said one of those Saturday afternoons. "She creates new solutions. It's as if her mind operates on another level." Robert smiled, proud but also worried. "And is that a good thing?" "It's rare, very rare, but it needs to be protected. The world doesn't always know how to handle people like her." Dr. Warren's warning echoed in Robert's mind over the next few days. He knew she was right. The world was cruel to those who stood out. He himself was proof of that. And now, more than ever, he needed to make sure Maya was safe. That's why Robert became alert when he started noticing strange things. Small things, almost imperceptible. A car that drove slowly past their building, always at the same time. A man in a suit who seemed to be waiting for someone on the corner, but who would disappear when Robert got close. Silent calls from unrecognized numbers on his cell phone. It could have been paranoia, a consequence of years of dealing with betrayal and distrust. But Robert couldn't take any chances. He installed a new lock on the door, reinforced the window latches, and started walking Maya to school every day. Even when she complained she was old enough to go by herself. He didn't explain why, he didn't want to scare her. But the feeling that something was about to happen wouldn't leave him. The confirmation came unexpectedly. Robert was at the supermarket, buying groceries, when he bumped into a woman he recognized immediately. It was Sarah, a former colleague from Miller and Davis, one of the few people who hadn't completely abandoned him after the scandal. "Robert?" Sarah looked surprised, but also relieved. "I can't believe it's you. You fell off the map." "It was necessary." Robert forced a smile. "How are you?" "Good, I think. Still in investments, but at a smaller firm now. And you, what have you been up to?" "Taking care of my daughter." Sarah blinked, confused. "Daughter? I didn't know you had—" "It's a long story." Robert didn't want to get into details. "But tell me something. Are you still in touch with anyone from the old firm?" Sarah hesitated. "A few." "Why?" "Is Edward still around?" The name landed like a stone between them. Sarah lowered her voice. "He is. And he's doing very well, actually. Opened a new firm, Davis Capital. He's already landed several big clients. He does events, gives talks. He's in magazines." Robert felt his stomach turn. Of course Edward was doing well. While he was struggling to survive in a tiny apartment, the man who had destroyed his life was thriving. And the investigations, the lawsuits, dropped, all of them. Sarah looked uncomfortable. "He has good lawyers and connections." Robert nodded, trying to control the rising anger. "Thanks for telling me." "Robert, I know it's hard, but—" Sarah touched his arm. "Let it go. Move on with your life. You won't gain anything by digging this up again." But Robert couldn't let it go. Not when he knew Edward had used his reputation as a shield while siphoning off billions. Not when innocent people had lost their life savings because of that scheme. And now, with Maya by his side, he had something Edward would never expect, an ally who saw the world differently. That night, after Maya had gone to sleep, Robert stayed up in the living room thinking. He had sworn he would never go back to that world, that he would leave the past behind and focus only on rebuilding his life. But the truth was the past had never really left. It was there lurking, waiting for the right moment to strike. It was on a Thursday that everything changed. Robert and Maya were invited to a charity gala at the Plaza Hotel in New York. Dr. Warren had gotten them tickets through a university contact. It was a black-tie event to benefit underprivileged children with academic talents, and Dr. Warren thought it would be good for Maya to see that there was a world beyond the classroom, a world where knowledge was valued. Robert hesitated. He had avoided social events since the scandal. The idea of being surrounded by people who would likely recognize and judge him was not appealing. But Maya was excited. It was the first time she had shown interest in something that wasn't math or her books, and Robert didn't have the heart to say no. They rented clothes for the occasion. Maya wore a simple but elegant navy blue dress, and Robert wore a suit he hadn't put on in years, which was now a little too loose. When they arrived at the hotel, the opulence of the place hit them like a wave. Enormous chandeliers, tables decorated with white flowers, waiters serving champagne and hors d'oeuvres. It was a world Robert knew well, but one that now seemed distant, almost unreal. Maya held his hand tightly. She had never been in a place like this. Her eyes scanned everything with curiosity, but also with caution. Robert leaned down and whispered, "It's okay. We'll just stay for a little while, say hi to Dr. Warren, and then we'll go." But things didn't go as planned. They were near the stage when a man went up to give a speech. Robert recognized the voice before he even saw the face. It was Edward Davis. He looked impeccable in a black tuxedo, his graying hair slicked back, a confident smile on his face. He spoke about the importance of investing in young talent, about how the country's future depended on supporting children with potential. He spoke with his usual eloquence, earning applause from the audience. Robert felt his blood boil. This man, who had stolen billions, was now presenting himself as a philanthropist, as someone who cared about others. It was sickening. But he held back. He squeezed Maya's hand and tried to stay calm. It was then that something unexpected happened. Edward began to present a new investment project, a financial model that, he claimed, would revolutionize how pension funds operated in the country. He displayed charts, tables, projections. The audience watched, impressed. Maya, who had been quiet until then, suddenly frowned. She looked at the charts projected on the screen with intense focus, her eyes moving quickly, as if she were calculating something. Robert noticed the change in her. "What is it?" "That's wrong," Maya said softly. "What?" "The numbers. The formula he's using, it's wrong." Robert looked at the screen, but to him, everything seemed normal. Polished graphs, impressive numbers. "Are you sure?" Maya nodded. "He's using a linear projection where he should have used an exponential one. And the compound interest is calculated incorrectly. If anyone invests based on this, they're going to lose money." Robert felt a chill run down his spine. Maya was only 9, but she was analyzing a complex financial model and identifying errors that experienced economists would likely miss. And if she was right, Edward was once again deceiving investors. Before Robert could stop her, Maya let go of his hand and started walking toward the stage. He tried to grab her, but she was too fast. The little girl climbed the side steps and stood next to Edward, who looked at her confused. "Sorry to interrupt," Maya said, her voice firm and clear, cutting through the silence of the ballroom. "But there's a mistake in your calculations." The audience fell silent. Edward forced a smile. "Well, we have a curious young lady here. What's your name, sweetie?" "Maya." She pointed to the screen. "The formula you used to calculate the return is wrong. You applied simple interest where it should be compounded, and the growth rate is overestimated by at least 15%. Edward's smile faltered. "Honey, this is a complex model. It might be a little hard to understand for—" "I understand it." Maya crossed her arms. "And if you keep using that formula, your investors will lose millions within 5 years." The ballroom erupted in murmurs. Some people laughed, amused by the situation. Others seemed intrigued. Edward, however, was pale. He looked at Maya as if he were seeing a ghost. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice tense. "Just someone who knows how to do the math," Maya replied, and then she walked off the stage and back to Robert, who was frozen in the corner of the room. The rest of the night was a blur. Edward tried to resume his speech, but the spell was broken. People started asking questions, questioning the numbers. The event ended earlier than planned, and Robert and Maya left quickly before anyone could approach them. In the cab ride home, Maya was quiet. Robert looked at her, still trying to process what had happened. "Were you sure about what you said?" "I was." She didn't look at him. "The numbers didn't lie." "Do you realize what you just did?" Maya finally looked at Robert. "I know, I confronted that man in front of everyone, but he was wrong. And if nobody said anything, people were going to lose money." Robert took a deep breath. He was proud, but also terrified. Edward Davis was not someone who accepted being humiliated, especially by a child. And now he would know that Maya existed, that she had a talent capable of exposing his schemes. In the following days, the consequences were not long in coming. Robert started receiving strange calls, anonymous messages. The social worker assigned to Maya's case showed up unannounced, asking questions about the apartment's condition, about the girl's routine. There was something different in her tone, a coldness that wasn't there before. Robert realized what was happening. Edward was digging. And worse, he was trying to use the system against him. If he could prove that Robert was an unfit guardian, he could have Maya taken from his custody and silence her. One night after Maya had gone to sleep, Robert called Sarah. She answered on the third ring, her voice sleepy. "Robert, it's late. I know, I'm sorry, but I need your help." What happened? Robert told her everything. The event, the confrontation, the strange calls. Sarah listened. In silence, and when he finished, she sighed. "Robert, you need to get out of New York. Edward isn't going to let this go. I can't run, not again. Then you need protection. And proof." "Proof of what?" "That he's doing the same thing he did before, siphoning money, deceiving investors. If Maya could spot an error in his calculations, maybe she can find more. And if you have solid proof, you can take it to the authorities before he destroys you again." Robert was silent, processing the suggestion. It was risky, extremely risky. But Sarah was right. Standing still meant waiting for Edward to strike first, and he couldn't risk losing Maya. "Would you help me?" Robert asked. Sarah hesitated. "I can pass you some information, contacts, documents, but I can't get directly involved. I have a career to protect." "I understand. Any help is more than I could have hoped for." Over the next few days, Sarah sent Robert a series of encrypted files. They were internal documents from Davis Capital, financial reports, contracts. Robert printed everything out and showed it to Maya. "I need you to look at this carefully and tell me if you find anything wrong." Maya took the papers and began to analyze them. She spent hours poring over numbers, taking notes, drawing graphs. Robert watched her, impressed by her concentration. Finally, after 2 days, Maya looked up. "I found it." "What?" "A pattern. He's using shell corporations, small but frequent transfers. If you add them all up, it's millions. And the accounts are registered under the names of ghost companies, the same structure you described from the old scheme." Robert felt his heart race. "Are you sure?" Maya nodded. "The numbers don't lie." Robert took the documents and Maya's notes. Now he had something. It wasn't enough to take down Edward on its own, but it was a start. He needed help. Someone who understood investigations, security, how to navigate dangerous waters. That's when he remembered Laura. Laura Chen had been the head of digital security at Miller & Davis years ago. A brilliant, meticulous woman who had left the company months before the scandal broke, saying something was wrong. At the time, Robert hadn't believed her. Now, he understood that Laura had seen what he had refused to see. Finding Laura wasn't hard. She had a small cybersecurity consulting office in Midtown. Robert scheduled a meeting but didn't say why. When he walked into her office, Laura looked up from her computer and smiled, surprised. "Robert Miller, I thought you'd become a hermit." "Almost." Robert sat down. "I need your help." Laura crossed her arms. "I thought you'd never want to speak to me again after I left. I was wrong. You were right. About everything." Laura studied Robert for a long moment. "You want to go after Edward, don't you?" Yes. Why? Revenge. Justice. Robert took a deep breath. And protection. He's threatening my daughter. Laura frowned. Daughter? You have a daughter? Robert told her everything, from meeting Maya to the confrontation at the gala. Laura listened intently without interrupting. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair and whistled softly. You've gotten yourself into some serious trouble. I know. But you also have an advantage Edward never saw coming. What's that? Laura smiled. A child prodigy who sees invisible patterns. If she can map out his entire scheme, we can not only expose him, but also create a system to detect future fraud. Robert felt a flicker of hope. Will you help us? Laura thought for a moment. I will, but on one condition. What is it? If we're going to do this, we do it right. This isn't about revenge. It's about building something bigger, something that prevents other people from suffering what you suffered. Robert extended his hand. Deal. And so, an unlikely trio was formed. Robert, the fallen tycoon seeking redemption. Maya, the child prodigy with a talent for seeing beyond the numbers. And Laura, the security expert who had warned of the danger before it was too late. Together they began to assemble what they called Project Phoenix, an operation to expose Edward Davis and, more than that, to create a tool that could protect the financial system from frauds like his. It wouldn't be easy. Edward had power, money, and influence, but they had something he didn't expect: the truth, intelligence, and the determination of people with nothing left to lose. Laura's Midtown office became the headquarters for Project Phoenix. It was a small space with 3 computers, a long table cluttered with papers, and a coffee maker that ran non-stop. Robert, Maya, and Laura spent hours there, organizing information, analyzing documents, and building what would be not just an exposé, but a complete fraud detection system. Maya was the heart of the operation. Sitting in front of one of the computers, her hair tied back in a ponytail and her eyes glued to the screen, she worked with a concentration that bordered on obsessive. She had created a basic algorithm in the first few days, a mathematical sequence capable of identifying anomalous patterns in financial transactions. But now, with access to the data Sarah had provided, and with Laura's expertise in digital security, the algorithm was evolving into something far more powerful. It's like a radar, Maya explained to Robert one Saturday afternoon. It scans all the transactions and flags the ones that don't make sense, transfers that are too small but too frequent, accounts that pop up out of nowhere and disappear after a few months, movements that try to look legitimate but follow a typical money laundering pattern. Robert listened, impressed. And it can do that automatically? Yes. The more data I feed it, the more it learns. It's like teaching someone to recognize lies just by looking at the numbers. Laura, who was working on the system's security, added, if this works the way we hope we can offer it to, banks to the IRS to regulatory agencies, it would be a revolution. But Robert knew that before they could revolutionize anything, they had to survive. Edward Davis wasn't sitting still. The subtle threats had escalated into something more tangible. Robert started to notice he was being followed. Cars would park across from his building. People would show up at the same places he frequented. One afternoon, he came home to find the apartment door forced open. Nothing had been stolen, but the message was clear. They knew where he lived and they could get to him whenever they wanted. Robert didn't tell Maya about the break-in. He didn't want to scare her. But Laura noticed his tension and pulled him aside when Maya was distracted by her code. He's closing in, isn't he? Laura asked quietly. Robert nodded. I can't put Maya in danger. If things get worse, I'll send her away, maybe upstate to a cousin's house. And you'll stay? I have to. Someone needs to be the bait while we finish this. Laura grabbed his arm. Robert, this isn't about you being a hero. If Edward takes you out, who's going to take care of Maya? The question hit Robert like a punch. He hadn't thought of that. He was so focused on protecting Maya that he hadn't considered the obvious. If something happened to him, she would be alone again, and everything they had built together would crumble. So what do you suggest? Robert asked, his voice tense. We need to move faster. Finish the algorithm, gather all the evidence, and hand it all over at once. We can't drag this out. The longer this takes, the more dangerous it gets." Robert agreed. That night he talked to Maya. He explained, without going into frightening detail, that they needed to work faster. Maya understood. She always understood more than he wished she did. "Dad, I know that man is dangerous," Maya said, looking him in the eye. "But we can't give up. If we give up, he'll just keep doing this to other people. And he'll get away with it again." Robert hugged his daughter. "I won't let anything happen to you." "I know." Maya rested her head on his chest. "But you have to be okay too. You're all I have." Maya's words echoed in Robert's head for days. He had to be more careful. For her. The algorithm was finally finished 3 weeks later. Maya named it Phoenix in honor of the project. It was an elegant, efficient, and terrifyingly accurate tool. When Laura ran the system for the first time using real data from Davis Capital, the results were devastating. The algorithm identified over 200 suspicious transactions in just 6 months. Transfers totaling nearly $5 billion, distributed among shell corporations, front companies, and offshore accounts. "My God," Laura whispered, staring at the numbers on the screen. "He's stealing in plain sight. Again." Robert felt the anger rise. $5 billion. Money from retirees, from small investors, from people who trusted Edward. And he was siphoning it all away without remorse, while presenting himself as a philanthropist at social events. "We have to take this to the authorities," Laura said. "The FBI, the DA's office. With this evidence, there's no way he can escape." But before they could act, Edward made his move. Robert received a phone call on a Tuesday night. It was an unknown number. When he answered, he heard the voice he hadn't heard in years. "Robert, it's been a while." Robert's stomach tightened. "Edward, just calling to see how you are. I heard you adopted a child. How touching." His voice was calm, almost friendly, but there was venom behind every word. "What do you want?" "I want us to talk. In person. There are things that need to be settled." "I have nothing to talk to you about." "Oh, but you do. Especially about that brilliant little girl who decided to embarrass me at a public event." Edward laughed, a cold sound. "She's special, isn't she? It's a shame such talented children need a stable environment. It would be a tragedy if she ended up back on the streets because of an unfit guardian." Robert's blood ran cold. "You won't touch her." "I don't have to. The system will do it for me. An anonymous tip here, an investigation there. You know how it works, Robert. After all, you've been through it before." "What do you want?" Edward was silent for a moment. "I want you to stop digging where you shouldn't. I know you're investigating. I know you have help. And I know your little girl is using that talent of hers to try and hurt me. She's using her talent to expose the truth." "The truth?" Edward laughed again. "Robert, haven't you learned yet? The truth doesn't matter. What matters is who has the power, and I have it. You don't. Then why are you calling me? If you're so powerful, why bother with me?" Edward paused. When he spoke again, his tone was more serious. "Because I don't want any unnecessary complications, so I'm going to make you an offer. You stop this ridiculous investigation, delete everything you've found, and I'll leave you and your daughter in peace. More than that, I'll give you back half of what was taken back then. 4.7 billion. You can use it to rebuild your life. Give the girl a first-class education. Everybody wins." Robert was silent, processing the offer. $4.7 billion. It was more money than he had ever dreamed of recovering. With it, he could secure Maya's future, give her every opportunity she deserved. But there was a price. Silence. Complicity. Letting Edward walk free to harm other people. "I need to think," Robert said finally. "You have 48 hours. After that, the offer expires and things will get ugly." The line went dead. Robert stood in the middle of the living room, the phone still in his hand, his heart pounding. He didn't know what to do. He looked at Maya, who was asleep on the couch, clutching a math book. She trusted him. She believed he would do the right thing. But what was the right thing? Take the money and ensure her safety, or press forward and risk everything? The next morning, Robert told Laura everything. She listened in silence, but when he finished, she shook her head. "If you take that deal, Robert, you'll carry that guilt for the rest of your life, and so will Maya. She's smart. She'll figure out what you did, and she'll lose respect for you. And if I refuse and he makes good on his threat, what if I lose custody of her? We'll fight, but you can't be a party to this, not after everything you've been through." Robert knew Laura was right, but fear was stronger than reason. That night he talked to Maya. He didn't tell her about Edward's offer, but he asked what she would do if she were in his shoes. "If it were me," Maya said thoughtfully, "I'd choose to do what's right, even if was hard." "And what if doing the right thing meant losing something important?" Maya looked at him with those deep eyes. "Dad, you taught me that you can't build anything good on a foundation of lies. If we take dirty money, we become dirty too. And I don't want that. Not for me and not for you." Robert felt his eyes sting. How could this girl, who had starved on the streets, who had lost everything, still have such moral clarity? How could she see the world with such honesty? The next morning, Robert called Edward. "I have my answer. I'm listening." "No, I don't accept." The silence on the other end was heavy. Finally, Edward spoke, his voice ice cold. "You're going to regret this." "Maybe, but at least I'll be able to sleep at night." Edward hung up without another word. Robert knew the war had truly begun. In the following days, things escalated quickly. The social worker overseeing Maya's case showed up with a court order to temporarily remove the girl from Robert's custody, citing allegations of neglect. Robert knew they were lies planted by Edward, but he couldn't prove it. Maya was taken to a temporary shelter. While the case was investigated, the separation was devastating. Maya cried for the first time since Robert had met her. She begged to stay, promised she would be good, that she wouldn't be any trouble. Robert tried to be strong, but inside he was shattered. He hugged his daughter and whispered, "This is temporary. I'm coming to get you, I promise." Alone in the apartment, Robert fell apart. He called Laura, who came over immediately. "We can't let this stand," she said, furious. "He's using the system against you, again." "What can we do?" "We accelerate everything. Gather the evidence, hand it over to the authorities, expose him publicly before he has time to protect himself." Laura spent the night organizing all the documents. She created a complete dossier with the suspicious transactions, the algorithm's data, and the connections between the shell companies and Edward's accounts. The next day she scheduled meetings with prosecutors from the DA's office, with agents from the FBI, and with investigative journalists. But Edward was one step ahead. Before they could deliver the dossier, a story broke in the press. A detailed article published in one of the country's biggest newspapers portrayed Robert as a mentally unstable man who had irregularly adopted a child, manipulating her to use in a revenge scheme against a respected businessman. The article included photos, quotes from experts, and even claims that Maya was an invention, a hoax created by Robert to get attention. The backlash was immediate. Social media exploded with criticism, conspiracy theories, and attacks. Robert was called everything: an opportunist, a manipulator, a lunatic. Some even doubted that Maya really existed. Robert was paralyzed. He didn't know how to handle it. It felt like the whole world had turned against him, but Laura didn't give up. She knew the best defense was a good offense. "We're going to expose everything now before he has time to control the narrative," Laura said, determined. She scheduled a press conference. She invited every media outlet she could reach. And on the scheduled day, in a small rented auditorium in downtown Manhattan, Robert, Laura, and a lawyer who had agreed to take the case pro bono presented everything: the proof, the documents, the algorithm, the transactions. They showed that Maya was not an invention, but a real brilliant child who had created a tool capable of unmasking billion-dollar frauds. The press conference had an immediate impact. Journalists asked questions, experts analyzed the data, and official agencies began to investigate. Edward tried to defend himself, denied everything, and claimed the evidence was fabricated. But the numbers didn't lie. And the more he tried to dodge, the guiltier he looked. Meanwhile, Robert fought in court to get Maya back. With the help of his lawyer and Dr. Warren, who testified to Robert's character and Maya's talent, he secured a hearing. The judge, after reviewing the documents and hearing the testimonies, decided to return temporary custody to Robert, stating there was no concrete evidence of neglect. When Robert picked Maya up from the shelter, she ran into his arms and cried, "I knew you'd come back, I knew it." "I'll always come back," Robert whispered, holding her tight. "Always." But the battle wasn't over. Edward, cornered, tried one last move. He publicly offered to return part of the stolen money in exchange for a deal. He said he was willing to cooperate with the investigations as long as his image was preserved. It was then that Maya, watching the news on TV, said something that changed everything. "He'll do it again." Robert looked at her. "What?" "If we take the money and let him get away with it, he'll do it again. To other people. The pattern will continue, and we'll be responsible for it." Robert took a deep breath. Maya was right. As always, it wasn't about the money. It never was. It was about justice. About doing the right thing, even when the right thing was hard. "Then we're seeing this through to the end," Robert said, determined. Laura agreed. "Let's do it." In the following days, they handed over the complete dossier to the FBI, the DA's office, and international anti-money laundering agencies. The Phoenix algorithm was released as open source code, allowing any financial institution or regulatory body to use it to detect fraud. The impact was global. Edward was arrested, his assets frozen, his accounts blocked. The billions he had siphoned off began to be traced and recovered. And Maya, the girl who sold origami in the rain, became a symbol of a new era of transparency and justice in the financial system. But for Robert and Maya, the real victory wasn't in the numbers or the headlines. It was in the fact that together they had faced the impossible, and won. Not with power or money, but with courage, intelligence, and an unshakable belief that the truth always matters. The months following Edward Davis's arrest were like waking from a long, suffocating nightmare. Robert followed the news with a mixture of relief and disbelief. The man who had destroyed his life, who had stolen billions and ruined hundreds of families, was now facing justice. There were no more confident smiles, no more impeccable tuxedos. Edward appeared in television footage handcuffed, head bowed, being escorted to court hearings where every detail of his crimes was laid bare. The FBI, with the help of the Phoenix algorithm, managed to trace nearly all the stolen money. Accounts in tax havens were frozen, investments in front companies were blocked, and properties and assets that Edward had accumulated over years of fraud were recovered. The total amount exceeded $6 billion. It was hard to even imagine such a large number, but Maya, always with her precise mind, reminded Robert of its real meaning. Thousands of families who would have their savings returned, pensions that would be paid, dreams that could be resumed. Robert felt no pleasure in Edward's downfall. There was no room for revenge in his heart. Just a deep exhaustion, the feeling that he could finally rest. But there was something stronger than the exhaustion. Gratitude. Gratitude for having Maya by his side, for finding Laura, for having the courage to do what was right when it would have been so easy to just take the money and disappear. Maya, for her part, handled the fallout with a maturity that was surprising for a 9-year-old. She had become well known, not just in the United States, but internationally. Foreign newspapers published stories about the child prodigy who exposed a billion-dollar scheme using only mathematics. Universities reached out offering future scholarships. Tech companies wanted to invest in the development of the Phoenix algorithm, and anti-corruption organizations asked to collaborate. But Maya didn't let the fame go to her head. She remained the same quiet, observant girl who preferred spending her afternoons solving equations to giving interviews. When Robert asked if she was happy with all the attention, Maya shrugged. "What's important isn't what people say about me. It's what we managed to do." And what they had managed to do was in fact extraordinary. The Phoenix algorithm was adopted by banks, the IRS, and regulatory agencies around the world. It created a kind of digital immune system against financial fraud. Every new attempt at embezzlement was identified before it could cause major damage. Experts called it the greatest innovation in financial security in decades, and it had all started with a girl selling origami in the rain and a broke man who decided to do the right thing. With a portion of the recovered funds, Robert, Laura, and Maya created a non-profit foundation called the Phoenix Institute. The goal was simple: to identify and support children with exceptional talents living in vulnerable situations, to offer education, housing, psychological support, and opportunities. Maya wanted other kids to have what she had: a chance. The institute started small, occupying a rented brownstone in the East Village, the same neighborhood where Robert and Maya had met. But it grew quickly. Donations poured in from all over the country, volunteers offered to help, and university professors taught classes for free. Before long, the institute was serving 50 children, all with similar stories. Immense talent, but no resources to develop it. Maya got personally involved with each of them. She taught math classes, helped with their studies, and offered advice. She understood what it was like to be alone, to be scared, to feel like the world didn't care. And now she wanted to show these children that there was hope, that there was a path forward, that they weren't alone. Robert, meanwhile, took over the administration of the institute. It wasn't the glamorous job he once had, dealing with billions in glass-walled offices. It was something much simpler, but infinitely more meaningful. He organized donations, talked to sponsors, and made sure every child had what they needed. And when he saw the smile of a child who had won a scholarship, or the tear of a parent who finally had hope for their child's future, Robert understood that it was worth more than any multi-million-dollar contract he had ever signed. Laura continued to work in digital security, but now she dedicated half her time to the institute. She trained the children in programming, cybersecurity, and how to use technology to create real-world solutions. Many of them, inspired by Maya, began to develop their own projects: apps for underserved communities, early warning systems for natural disasters, educational tools. The institute became a hotbed of innovation, a place where talent flourished regardless of its origins. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were challenges, difficult moments. Robert had health problems, a consequence of the stress he had accumulated over the years. He needed surgery to have stents put in his heart and was hospitalized for a week. Maya never left his side. She brought her math notebooks to the hospital, solving problems while holding her father's hand, as if the numbers were a form of prayer, a way of asking the universe to make him well. When Robert was discharged, Maya hugged him tightly and whispered, "You can't leave. Me not now." "I won't," Robert promised, and he kept his word. He started taking better care of his health, exercising, eating right, not for himself, but for her, because Maya needed him, and he needed her. The years passed. Maya grew up, but she remained the same brilliant and humble girl. At 12, she was already collaborating with university professors on advanced research in applied mathematics. At 14, she published her first paper in an international scientific journal on optimizing fraud detection algorithms. At 16, she received offers from Harvard, MIT, and Oxford, but she chose to stay in New York to study at Columbia and to continue working at the institute she had helped create. "I could go anywhere in the world," Maya told Robert one Sunday afternoon as they had coffee in the kitchen. "But my place is here, with you, with the kids who need what we do." Robert felt his eyes sting. "You have a brilliant future ahead of you. You can't limit your choices because of me." "It's not because of you. It's my choice." Maya smiled. "You gave me a family. Now I want to do the same for other people." And that's what she did. The institute grew, becoming a national benchmark. Children who passed through its doors became engineers, doctors, scientists, and teachers. Some returned as volunteers, wanting to give back what they had received. The circle was complete, and what had begun as a gesture of compassion on a rainy night had transformed into a life-changing movement. Edward Davis was sentenced to 23 years in prison. His lawyers tried to appeal, claimed procedural errors, and asked for mistrials, but the evidence was too solid. The numbers didn't lie, as Maya always said. He lost everything. His company, his reputation, his freedom. Some people said it was an excessive punishment, that he deserved a second chance. But those who had lost their life savings because of him didn't think so. For them, justice had finally been served. Robert never visited Edward in prison. There was nothing to say. The past was the past. But he heard through acquaintances that Edward had changed, that he spent his days reading, studying, trying to understand where he had gone wrong, that he wrote letters of apology to his victims, even knowing many would never forgive him. Robert didn't know if it was sincere or just an attempt to reduce his sentence, but he preferred to believe that deep down, even someone like Edward could change, not for his own sake, but for the good of everyone. One Thursday afternoon, exactly 10 years after that rainy night when it all began, Robert and Maya returned to the corner of St. Mark's Place and 2nd Avenue, the spot where they first met. It was a sunny day, unlike that stormy night. The corner was busier, with new shops, people rushing by, cars honking. Maya looked around as if trying to recognize something. It looked so different. It is different, Robert said, but the memory is the same. They stood there side by side in silence. Robert thought about everything that had happened, about how one simple choice, one gesture of compassion, had changed the course of 2 lives. He was no longer the powerful tycoon who commanded billions. He was just an ordinary man with grey hair, wrinkles around his eyes, and a heart that needed care. But he was happy, happier than he had ever been when he had everything. Maya, now 19, was a brilliant young woman with her own dreams and an intelligence that continued to astound. But she was also humble, kind, and grateful. She knew where she came from, knew what it was like to have nothing. And that made her stronger. "Dad," Maya said, breaking the silence, "do you regret anything?" Robert thought for a moment. "I regret not believing the right people when I should have. I regret being so focused on money that I forgot what really mattered. But I don't regret stopping on that night and buying an origami from a stranger. That was the best decision I ever made." Maya smiled, that rare smile she reserved, only for special moments. "I don't regret it either, not a thing. Not even confronting Edward at that gala. Especially confronting him, because that's where it all started. That's when I realized I could use my talent for something bigger than myself." Robert hugged his daughter. "I'm so proud of you." "And I'm so proud of you," Maya replied. They stood there for a few more minutes, just watching the street life. Then Maya took a small origami from her pocket, a blue bird, just like the one Robert had bought from her that night. She handed it to him. "I made this for you to remember where we came from." Robert took the bird carefully as if it were the most precious thing in the world, and in a way it was. It represented everything, the journey, the struggle, the redemption. It represented the love of a father and a daughter who found each other at the right time, even when all seemed lost. "Thank you," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. They walked home side by side, talking about plans for the Institute, about the kids, about the future. There was no more fear, no more shadows chasing them, just the certainty that together they could face anything. That night back at home, Robert looked out the apartment window. He still lived in the same place, in Astoria. He could have moved, bought something bigger, more comfortable. But that apartment was special. It was where everything had started over, where he and Maya became a family, and he didn't want to leave that behind. Maya was in the living room, working on her computer, probably tweaking some aspect of the Phoenix algorithm, or helping one of the kids from the Institute with their homework. She was tireless, always thinking of others, always looking for ways to help. Robert wondered where she got so much strength, so much kindness, and then he remembered. She had been through the worst of life and had come out the other side without losing her humanity. That's what made her special. Robert sat down next to her. "You need to rest, it's late." "Just 5 more minutes," Maya said, without taking her eyes off the screen. Robert smiled. He knew that answer. 5 minutes always turned into an hour. But he didn't mind. Seeing Maya so dedicated, so passionate about what she did was inspiring. "Maya," Robert said after a moment, I just want you to know one thing. She finally looked at him. What? You saved me. That night, when I found you, I was lost. No direction, no hope. I thought I was helping you, but you were the one who helped me. You gave me a reason to keep going. You showed me there was still good in the world. Maya was silent, processing his words. Then she stood up and hugged Robert. We saved each other. And it was true. They weren't just father and daughter, they two souls who had found each other at the right time, who completed each other, who made each other stronger. And together, they had changed not only their own lives, but the lives of hundreds of other people. Years later, when Robert was an old man with completely white hair, and Maya was a respected university professor and researcher, they still remembered that rainy night, the corner where it all began, the blue origami, the decision that changed everything. Maya never married, never had biological children, but she had hundreds of children at the institute, kids she helped, guided, and loved. She said her mission was to plant seeds of hope in soil where no one believed anything could grow. Robert lived to be 78. He died in his sleep, peacefully, without pain, after a life he considered full. At the funeral, Maya didn't cry. She just held her father's hand one last time and whispered, "Thank you for everything. Thank you for stopping that night." And then she carried on the work. Because that's what Robert would have wanted, for her to keep going, to keep helping, to keep making a difference. The Phoenix Institute exists to this day. It has helped thousands of children, shaping generations of brilliant young people who would have otherwise remained invisible. And it all started with a simple gesture, a broken man who decided to buy an origami from a little girl in the rain. People sometimes ask Maya how she managed to overcome everything she went through, how she became who she is. And she always gives the same answer. I had someone who believed in me when no one else did, someone who showed me that I mattered, and that made all the difference. The story of Robert and Maya isn't about recovered money or punished fraudsters. It's about redemption. It's about how a chance encounter can change the course of lives. It's about how compassion, courage, and a belief in what is right can transform the world. And when people ask Maya what the most important lesson she ever learned was, she smiles and says that the numbers never lie, but that love, kindness, and hope are the most powerful formulas that exist.